You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host.
Now, in our last episode, we began redefining modern masculinity, stepping beyond age-old stereotypes. What I want to do this week is to delve further and more deeply into the roots of these stereotypes by unpacking two foundational elements of patriarchy, and that is being territorial and being hierarchical. How do these concepts shape our understanding of masculinity and influence our behaviours and relationships? So let's explore. Let me explain the whole notion of patriarchy. Now, those of you who've been with me for a while, bear with me. I'm just reiterating this, and I'm hoping to get a bit more depth into the clarification about what patriarchy is, because most people simply think of it on political terms. But it's much more than that. Fundamentally, patriarchy is a social system in which men hold primary power, predominate in roles of leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. But it goes even deeper than that. It actually encompasses what we perceive men to be. And from there, take it that those characteristics are natural. They're innate. We're born with them. Where in fact, we can challenge that. Now, two of those core principles in patriarchy is about territory and hierarchy. Concepts that have historically justified the domination of men over women and some men over other men. Territory refers not just to physical space, but to areas of influence, be that at home, in the workplace, or within social institutions. On the other hand, hierarchy establishes levels of authority and power dynamics, mostly placing men at the top. And so for those of you living in Australia and have continued to watch Nemesis, think about it through this lens. So what does territory in the modern context look like? Well, predominantly in most families, we still operate either overtly or covertly on the basis that there's a man of the house who fundamentally is expected to be the provider, the decision maker. But what happens when these roles are challenged or changed? And this is where it gets really interesting, because we have now a rise, for example, in dual income households and the increasing empowerment of women that are reshaping these traditional territories. And what I see in my clinical practice is that there are a lot of men who like to adapt to it, but somehow emotionally feel really challenged in that space, to the point where they question their own sense of value. So here's an example. John, a carpenter, became the primary caregiver for his kids when his wife's career took her abroad. Now, initially, he struggled with the whole social perceptions of masculinity. But to the contrary, John found an enormous amount of fulfillment in nurturing his kids, and thereby challenging the traditional notion of male territory in the family. He didn't necessarily know that specifically at the time that he was doing it, but that's what happened. So the proposition that human relationships are significantly defined by emotional and relational territories is also an intriguing lens through which we can examine the dynamics of interpersonal connections. Emotional territory, unlike actual territory, refers to the range and depth of emotions and feelings that individuals are willing or able to share with each other. In other words, how far are you going to allow a person to come into your garden, into your space? Now, in contrast, relational territory involves the boundaries, the roles, and the spaces that people establish in their interactions with one another. These territories are crucial in developing, maintaining, and sometimes deteriorating relationships. So let me talk a little bit more about emotional territory. In this space, we're talking about something that encompasses the spectrum of emotions, feelings that individuals encounter and are comfortable expressing and sharing within a relationship. Now, for us, a lot of times as men, we're still struggling with the idea that I share my vulnerability. Like when shit's going down and I'm not doing that well, do I willingly and openly come to my partner and say, this is what's happening for me? Now, this particular territory is also influenced by such factors as trust, past experiences, and social norms. So it's not a simple thing. Now, I'll give you another example. So think about a romantic partnership where one individual, in this case, let's call that person Alex, has grown up in a family that valued emotional openness and encouraged discussing feelings very openly. However, Alex's partner, Jamie, was raised in an environment where emotional expression was discouraged, and especially vulnerability was seen as a weakness. Now, what's likely to happen in this relationship? Well, in this particular case, Alex's emotional territory is vast and includes a wide range of emotions from joy to sadness. And Alex feels comfortable sharing this with Jamie. Whereas Jamie's emotional territory, by contrast, is more restricted and potentially much more limited to expressions of happiness and frustration, and with deeper feelings of fear and sadness, which are kept private. That disparity in their emotional territories can lead to misunderstandings, feelings of disconnection, or pressure to change one's level of emotional openness. So it's going to put a lot of stress on the connectedness of these two people in their relationship. So let's talk a little bit more about relational territory. So as I said, relational territory refers to relationships shared in individual spaces, including physical, social, and conceptual areas. These territories define how individuals interact within their roles, how they manage their time together and apart, and integrate with wider social circles. So let me give you an example. Sam and Taylor are close friends who share a passion for hiking and often explore trails together. Their relational territory includes shared physical spaces, the trails they hike, shared activities, hiking, planning trips, and shared social circles, fellow hiking enthusiasts. However, Sam starts a new job and has less free time, shrinking the shared physical territory of their hikes. Additionally, Taylor begins dating someone uninterested in outdoor activities, which further alters the relational territory between Sam and Taylor by introducing new social dynamics and reducing the time available for shared activities. That change in their relational territory requires negotiation and adaptation to maintain the friendship. Acknowledging acknowledging the need for flexibility in how they connect and what activities they can share. Now, if you think back to some other podcasts that I've done, one of the things that I talk about that we need to foster within ourselves as men, women as well, but let's talk men, is that we need to be more self-aware, we need to be flexible so that we can be more adaptable. And this comes into this space as well. So let's now move on from territory to hierarchy and the impact that has. Now, hierarchy, while structuring society, also perpetuates power imbalances. It's evident in workplaces where leadership roles are predominantly male, often reflecting and reinforcing a belief in male superiority. Now, I'm going to bring in our friend Jordan Peterson here, not to pick on him, but I think to use as an example. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Jordan Peterson, and there may be some of you out there, he's a clinical psychologist and a cultural critic, if you want to put it in a box. And he sparked considerable debate through his discussions on the nature and inevitability of hierarchies within human societies. Now, one of his notable arguments involves the role of serotonin, a neurotransmitter, in regulating feelings of status and dominance in humans and across the animal kingdom. Now, Peterson in this context talks about the lobsters, and he uses them as an example to illustrate how hierarchies are natural and biologically ingrained, arguing that serotonin levels in these creatures change with their social standing, which in turn affects their posture and behavior. He's extrapolated this argument to humans to suggest that social hierarchies in human relationships are natural and necessary for the organization of complex societies. Now, let me present a critique of his argument. Now, the first problem with this is that his argument presupposes a biological reductionism. So what do I mean by that? Critics, like myself, will argue that while biology plays a role in human behavior, social structures and hierarchies are far more complex and can't be fully explained by biological factors alone. I mean, think about it. We're attributing a lot of things to one little neurochemical. Human societies are influenced in themselves by culture, social norms, education, and individual experiences that go beyond the simplistic explanation of serotonin levels affecting social dominance and hierarchies. So in this context, Peterson's argument underestimates the influence of environmental and social factors in shaping human behavior and social structures. Now, another critique of Peterson in this case is that the use of lobsters as a model for understanding human social structures is an oversimplification. While there might be biological underpinnings to behavior, the leap from lobster biology to human social structures overlooks human society's nuanced and multifaceted nature. Human hierarchies are not solely based on physical dominance or aggression, but they're also shaped by intelligence, empathy, cooperation, and other cultural interconnected values. So, again, Peterson's in that very two-dimensional space. So he ignores social and cultural evolution. How does he do that? Well, unlike lobsters, humans have a capacity for self-reflection, moral judgment, the ability to challenge and change social structures through collective action and societal social norms. So Peterson's theory underestimates human agency and the capacity for social change. And it sort of brings with it a rather fatalistic view of social hierarchies as unchangeable and biologically determined. The other issue that we have is that there is a massive problem with ethical and social implications in his argument. By suggesting that hierarchies are natural and biologically ingrained, there is a risk of justifying inequality and discouraging efforts towards social justice and equality. Now, I would argue that this perspective also is used to rationalise the status quo, undermine initiatives to reduce social and economic disparities, and therefore promote a more equitable society. It's a bit like Ayn Rand, or Hawking's, there are, social lifters and social leaners. So what do we do with this? Well, we need to be very careful, and I want to encourage everybody to think critically about what we served up. And Jordan Peterson, I use him because he's got a lot of influence on people, especially young men. And the tendency with his argument is to support and maintain patriarchal norms, not challenge them. I'm all about challenging and deconstructing those patriarchal norms. So the question is, how do we challenge these? And my argument is that we need to do that by questioning and redefining our understanding of territory and hierarchy. In fact, if we're too rigid on either, is that going to be particularly detrimental to us? I mean, we accept that in certain areas, hierarchies are useful. But what we need to do is we need to bring in and recognise the value of shared responsibilities and diverse leadership. So, embracing shared decision-making in households and promoting diversity in leadership can dismantle traditional patriarchal structures rather quickly. Because we're bringing people in, we're becoming inclusive. So it's about creating spaces where everyone, regardless of gender, can thrive. So I guess to round this podcast off, how about we take some inspiration from John, a carpenter, a craftsman, who through circumstances has found joy in caregiving, in being a parent, and indirectly challenging the traditional family territories. Now, let's also advocate for leaders like Alex, someone who breaks ceilings and redefines what it means to lead. So as we conclude today's episode, I want to really encourage you to reflect on how territories and hierarchies exist in your life, how they add or subtract to the quality of your life. Ask yourself the question how I can challenge them to foster a more inclusive and equitable family, community, society. These are important questions that most of us don't actually sit with and explore. So, on that note, let me ask you to join me next week as we explore the whole acquisitional mindset and where we begin to rethink the whole notion of success. And together, I want to encourage us to continue to unravel the fabric of masculinity that ultimately will inspire change. So this is me, Gunter, signing off. Remember, the journey to change begins with every one of us. Stay tuned. Till next time, this is me signing off.
Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.